Number 441-30, as substituted by the Committee on Rules, Natural Resources, and Federal, Foreign, and Micronesian Affairs. And it's an act relative to the adoption of the Environmental Protection Agency's pesticide regulations. I move that this be placed in the voting file with some discussion.
Any objection to the motion?
Thank you
Please
very
proceed.
much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I know that we've just gone through a very exhaustive process with the budget bill, and now it's my turn, the Committee on Natural Resources' turn, Mr. Speaker, to come before this body to present a 64-page document that would contain the rules and regs and how this island responds to the pesticide regulations. Just as the budget process was rooted in statutory requirements, and just as a good chairman of appropriations laid out a process for us and how it was quickly adopted, I wish to call your attention to a similar process undertaken by the Committee on Natural Resources. We've been in receipt of this bill roughly 90 days ago, Mr. Speaker, but we spent every single day that we've had this bill working with various stakeholders to make sure that we can come up with a win-win situation. Mr. Speaker, I wish at this time to kind of take some pause and recognize some members from the Environmental Protection Agency, Bedwin Haloka and Carl Olson and Conchita Taitnom. They've been with us every step of the way. I wish to also recognize our up-and-coming prospective person who wants to go to law school. I can't get her to go to law school yet, and that's Stephanie Mendiola, who kind of really sat with them every single day to go through the entire rules and regs that were submitted to us in draft form. And as you know, Mr. Speaker, the AAA process requires this kind of exchange, and we also have additional opportunities to kind of take those draft rules and regs and tweak it so that it's workable, and that's what the legislature does, and that's what the legislature did with Bill 441. I also attached a memorandum dated August 19, 2010 to all members of the legislature that kind of gives the cliff notes and what changes were made with the draft versus what changes were made to the original version. Just to give you a summary, Mr. Speaker, I attended with Senator Tidegui was there. I believe I attended the EPA board meeting where the board made a motion to adopt the draft rules and regs and have it transmitted to the legislature. And at that meeting, GHRA expressed some concerns with what the draft rules and regs and how it applied to the hotel and restaurant industry. The EPA board was very clear that although those concerns are valid, that they wanted to pass the thing to the legislature, understanding that the legislature has its own mechanisms to invite the public and have additional public hearings, and that's what we did. We held a series of roundtable meetings as well as a public hearing, which qualifies this bill to be before us. One of the stickling points, and one of the reasons why I believe it took EPA about 3 years to put these rules and regs together, and I don't want to take anything away from them because I know they worked really hard, but it was just a matter of understanding what we really want to do with how we want to regulate pesticides that come into our island, but also how pesticides are being applied. GHRA's concern with the original draft, Mr. Speaker, would have required every single housekeeper to undergo a basic training program on how to handle everyday pesticides such as Clorox or Lysol or anything with an EPA registration number. The Guam Hotel and Restaurant Association couldn't see why that is a requirement when residential users aren't required to do something like this. EPA's concern was that you're dealing in volume. You're dealing a resident who would use Lysol maybe for a couple seconds, couple minutes a day versus a housekeeper who would use Lysol for 8 hours a day. You're dealing with a residential home with 3 bedrooms versus a hotel with 100+ rooms. So if you argue it that way, you'll understand why there's a need to have these people go through the basic training program. My concern was that I didn't want us to have another mandate which EPA would not be able to comply with. And EPA admitted. I said that if you're going to be requiring housekeepers to go through this basic training program, and you're the one that's going to do the training in conjunction with UOG and GCC, and then you're going to have these people certified, and then EPA is going to be the one to test them, you might see that these housekeepers may not be eligible to work in the industry because our government will not be able to do the certification process. And so as a result of that back and forth, Mr. Speaker, and there were a lot of back and forths, the JHRA came up with a compromise to say that why don't we just train the trainers. And so from there, EPA was amenable, and this revised version takes into account that you can have the trainer, you can have leaders within the hotel and restaurant industry, you can have housekeeping supervisors go through this train the trainer program. It'll be a 4-hour program. They get certified through this process. They would go back to their respective hotel or restaurant business. They will train their coworkers. They will certify them based on the curriculum that would be adopted by EPA, and then they would submit the list to EPA, and EPA will give those individuals licenses. And that's the way we thought that we could accommodate how we can have 2,000 to 3,000 people get certified. And so everybody seemed to be amenable to that. And just as you would apply to public health for a special permit, public health doesn't actually go and see whether or not all these individuals, for all intents and purposes, are eligible to get this health certificate. All you would have to do as an event coordinator, Mr. Speaker, is just provide a listing of names to public health. They would look at the names. They would give each person a health certificate permit, and that's how you handle special events. Likewise, this is how you would handle having every single person who's supposed to be certified without having EPA be burdened with having to do this themselves. So you're already seeing how a change in that reflected in some kind of acceptance to this document. We also heard from individuals in the industry, whereas the original draft rules and regs would have required that if any fumigation were to take place, that the surrounding neighbors within a 75-foot radius would have to be notified up to 14 days. Now the problem with that, Mr. Speaker, is if for some reason it wasn't really clear how they were to be notified, and if you were to do a project to fumigate a residential home or a commercial home, you would not, if you're not able to notify them up to 14 days, you probably could never do the work because your neighbor may be off island or people may just be not easy to get a hold of. And so we amended that to give them up to 2 days, and we also required a provision where they could just post the notices, on the residential home or in the business establishment. Our good colleague, Senator Atta, pointed out that in the original draft form, it would have required the company to give notice to every single household resident. So if there's 5 people in that home, all 5 people would have been notified. So what we did with Betwin and Carl's agreement, Mr. Speaker, is that we just allowed the head of house, or we just had where the head of household or the business owner would be notified. So that was, a significant change in terms of clarifying what we did with this Draft Pesticides Act. I called to the body's attention an area which we're still struggling with, and that's whether or not to include furans under the definition of pesticides. We have Dr. Moore from the University of Guam who's expressed concern that under his own research and his own academic background says that furans shall not be included as part of the definition of pesticides. But EPA has an advisory from U.S. Region 9 that says that if we don't adopt that language in this particular statute, they could lose their right to regulate this locally. And so that would be a direct consequence. And so what I suggested we do is we could just adopt this as US EPA is recommending, and the legislature could always reserve the right to come back and address that particular issue if in fact we can get someone else from US EPA to be of a different opinion. But right now, I don't want to run the risk of not including it, Mr. Speaker, and then losing our local authorities' ability to regulate that, and then these businesses or individuals will have to deal directly with US EPA, and I don't think we want to see another agency under a quote-unquote receivership or third-party custodian. We don't want to ever lose any ability we have to regulate our things, these kinds of things locally. Mr. Speaker, the other area, and I, along with recognizing individuals, I really want to recognize Mr. Joey Lopez, who sat with us through the roundtable and through the public hearing processes, and actually came up with recommendations together with the committee and with EPA on a revised fee schedule. And if you look at the final page of the fee schedule, it's final page of this bill before us, Mr. Speaker. It sets up a fee schedule of how much to charge for notice of arrival, terminate soil application, fumigation of permit fee, chemigation of permit fee, pesticide dealer's license, certification cards, qualification cards, pest control operator's license, and pesticide trainer's license. When I talked about the Train the Trainer program, we understand that people who have small restaurants or other small businesses who don't have the luxury of having a complement of a full housekeeping staff or a supervisor for that staff, we provided provisions in this bill, Mr. Speaker, to allow a Train the Trainer program where individuals from these smaller companies can either partner up with the Hotel and Restaurant Association because they would have their own Train the Trainer identified, or they can just partner up with someone who has a business to do something like this, or they could just go directly to the University of Guam or the Guam Community College when EPA sets this training program up with them. And that's why we still have the qualification cards for both instances. Mr. Speaker, under the Notice of Arrival, NOA, when EPA first submitted the draft version to us, they were requesting that it be $1 a case per EPA registration number. Now the problem with that, and what we saw, is that if you're a bigger business, you can bring in a lot of 1,000 pieces, and you'll only be charged $1 because you're tracking the EPA registration number, versus a smaller company who would bring in 10 cases of the same item, they'd also be charged $1. So the recommendation from the committee is that we would charge $3 a case for up to 10 cases and one additional case thereafter. But we just received some concern, and additional clarification needs to be made, because, for example, if you're in the retail supermarket business and you're going to bring in 10 different variations of Lysol or 10 different variations of ant and roach spray, and if you have an ant, roach, and spider spray, you might be having different EPA numbers. And so what the EPA is asked the legislature to do, and what I'm recommending now, is that we should adopt the fee schedule from items 2 to 9. Now it's Madam Speaker, and I have an amendment which the clerk is working on that would delay the implementation of this item 1 till January 1st, 2011, and that would give the environmental. Oh, you made copies? Yeah, the copies. I have an amendment, and the amendment would read to add the following note to Appendix 1, Table 1, Item 1, explanation, and it'll say note effective January 1st, 2011, Madam Speaker. So this will give us more time to clarify with EPA what exactly we're going to be charging with this particular item, and they seem to be copacetic to that.
So on the Respicio amendment, no objection, so ordered. Senator Respicio, you may continue.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I know I just kind of generally glossed through 64 pages of a bill before us, and I never intend to downplay the amount of work that's gone into this document. I don't want to downplay the amount of work that EPA has done over the last 3 years and what the Committee on Natural Resources has done over the last 90 days. But I think what I could glean from this exercise, Madam Speaker, is that if this legislature, through your leadership, has really provided a process that's open and transparent and allows for any member of the public to come forward and express their concerns to us, and that's what we did. We asked EPA, rather than being rigid, or rather than saying, we already passed the AAA process. We already passed the public hearing process. Those concerns are valid, but now it's before the legislature. I think the fact that we asked them to be open and address these concerns together with us, and they've been really good, Madam Speaker. The EPA employees that took the lead in bringing this before us have really gone above and beyond, I believe, to kind of use their common sense thinking, as when Mr. Lopez said, when I'm being commissioned a project, when a homeowner calls me because they're termite infested, they don't want to wait 14 days. They don't want to wait 1 month. They want the thing to be done immediately. But in recognizing what the stakeholders' concerns are, we in no way watered down what our regulatory agency wanted to do. And if you talk to Betwin and Carl or Conchita or anyone that was involved in this, they've gone on the public record saying the amendments that the committee made in this version that's being proposed to the body, we in no way, Madam Speaker, watered down what their intent is, and we're still preserving a previous public law which required them to develop the rules and regs for how we are able to regulate pesticides here on Guam. So I offer this bill up for discussion. I'm prepared to answer any questions any of our colleagues have. And like I said, we have been appropriately staffed by a member of my staff, Stephanie Mendiola. So together we'll be prepared to shepherd this bill through this legislative process. So thank you for the opportunity to present Bill 441.
Thank you very much, Senator Respicio. So on the main motion, is there anybody who would like to speak on the main motion? Senator Ada, you are recognized.
Madam Speaker, I rise in support of Bill 441-30. I did sit in on a couple of the roundtable discussions and the public hearing on the bill, and listened to the discussions and the input that were provided by the staff of EPA, by those in the industry who are actually affected by the rules and regulations that are being put out. And during those discussions, there was a lot of good input that was provided. There was a lot of good give and take, and I think that in the end, what has resulted is a set of rules and regulations that are workable, and in the end serves the objective of protecting the welfare of the community from these pesticides and these chemicals. As an example, of course, the Guam EPA is very protective of its turf and tends to be on the conservative side. Nonetheless, they were certainly very much open to taking a look at some of these regulations from a different perspective, and taking a look at the requirements not so much from a prescriptive standpoint, but more so from a performance standard For example, originally in the rules and regulations, there was a requirement in there that prior to the application of any pesticides, let's say having to fumigate a home, that they had to put out 14-day notice. However, the folks in the industry indicated that usually when households come in and request from a company to provide fumigation to their house, it is because the extent of the pests in the home have become so bad that it is really, in their perspective, an emergency, and is something that needs to be addressed immediately, and really cannot afford that 14-day timeline. And so it was indicated that the guidelines really should be based on a performance standard, wherein if it only takes a day or to be able to notify the neighbors in the surrounding neighborhood of the fumigation that's going to take place, and make them be aware so that they can take the appropriate measures, that 14 days is really not required if you can do it in a day or two. And so they were certainly receptive to that idea, and made the necessary compromises so that these regulations are in fact workable and would be responsive to the needs of the consumer as well. And so I think that after many hours of sitting around the table and discussing these, I'm confident and I'm satisfied that I think we have a set of rules and regulations here that are workable, looks after the welfare of the community, and certainly addresses the needs of the community in terms of the use of these pesticides. So I would urge my colleagues to support the passage of Bill 441-30. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you very much, Senator Ada. On the motion, Senator Taitui, you recognize.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I too was at that public hearing. Unfortunately, emergency had me leave a little bit earlier to go to the final last few pages of the bill that was proposed. And my concern was with regards now seeing the fee schedule that was here. And I guess I have to ask the good author if he could yield to a question with regards to these new fee schedule.
Okay, would you like
Okay.
Senator, do
my
you
que-
yield to the question after she asks, of course? Thank you, Senator. you may
Madam
continue.
Speaker, my question is, this cost here, as I tried to do some research with regards to fee schedules that were done in the past, as you know, Madam Speaker, many of our fees have not been raised since 19 and it's important that we do follow with this, considering economic constraints and the inflation that are there. But I was wondering if there was a previous fee schedule like this before.
Senator Espicio?
Speaker, this is actually a new program that EPA is trying to do, so there's no existing fee schedule. But I'll have you note that originally we had to tweak this fee schedule, and we actually made it a little bit more reasonable, and in some cases it was higher than what the EPA was proposing, because members from the industry stepped forward and said, the fumigation permit fee at I think what they were requesting originally was a lot lower than what we're requesting now. It's $1,000. But there is no current pesticide program being run by EPA or being run anywhere for that matter. So this is an entirely new program that EPA is developing. And so we made the fees not only reasonable, but there is a rationale behind why these prices are as such. And it's kind of our way to have that. And I understand what the senator is trying to say. We should charge for the services that are being provided. And this is one way to help set up EPA to eventually be autonomous. And so we took that into consideration.
Okay, thank you, Madam Speaker. That answers my question. I'm satisfied. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Senator Taitui. On the motion, are there any other speakers? There being none, Senator Speaker, would you like to close?
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I'd just like to thank our colleagues for their support of this bill. I just want to point out that if the bill is passed and signed into law, that that this will be placed in the Guam Administrative Rules and Regulations, and it's not being placed in the Guam Code annotated. We're in constant communication with our own legislative council, and the next area we're going to get into is this entire AAA process, and we want to make sure that the adoptions of the AAA, the rules and regs through the AAA process, goes into the GAR and not into the code, because if it goes in the code, then we basically have said to the executive branch that in the future, when that rules and reg needs to be amended, you'd have to get a legislature to sponsor, senator to sponsor a bill to amend that because it's in the code. But if we keep it in the GAR, the Guam Administrative Rules and Regulations, then the executive branch still reserves the right to make any changes through that same AAA process they undertook to propose this to us. So that's something I'd like to notate for the record, that this would go into the GAR and not in the code. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Senator Speaker. So on the motion then to send Bill 441 to the third reading file without any objections, so ordered. Senator Respicio, there's another motion. Okay, Senator Blas.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, with in regards to Bill 373, I move that as a result of many discussions that we've had in the deliberations we had previously on Bill 373, there were some discussions, some matters that were brought, and that there already appears to be language already within code that that speaks to the utilization of the Chamorro language and utilization of Chamorro in a number of the required public notices and stuff. Therefore, so that this proposed legislation doesn't conflict with existing statute, and we wanted to make it in harmony, I'd like the opportunity to be able to pull the bill, put the bill back into back to committee, and work with the committee chair on making sure that this bill is in harmony with what is existing law already.
So on that motion then, without any objections, so ordered. Senator Respicio, you recognize.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Notwithstanding the House rules, I move that we revert back to motions for purposes of putting a resolution and two confirmations on the agenda.
On that motion, without any objections, so ordered.
Thank you
Senator
very much,
Respicio.
Madam Speaker. Under motions, I move from the Committee on Senator Pangalinan's Committee on Appropriations that the appointment of Lucia Perez to the Alcohol Beverage Control Board and the nomination of Cesar Garcia, the Guam Banking and Insurance Board, with the committee's recommendation to pass on both nominees. I move that that be placed in the voting file.
On that motion then, without any objection, well, let's break it up first. The first motion is to place resolution 427.
Oh, I didn't make that yet. Yeah.
Oh, you didn't do that one yet?
No, I was doing
Oh, I was reading
the
these.
confirmations.
Okay, let's do the confirmations
Yeah.
then. So on the motion then to place the confirmations of Lucia Perez and Cesar Garcia then on the consent, in the voting file? No objections, and so ordered.
Yeah. Thank you,
And
because we received the committee reports for those.
Resolution,
Yeah, and then Resolution 427, introduced by VC Pangilinan, relative to the disapproval of the proposed rules and regulations for commercial leases by the Chamorro Land Trust Commission. I move that this be placed on the second reading file.
on that motion, without any objection, so ordered. Okay. So Senator Pangilinan, you're recognized on Resolution 427.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I do want to state for the record that the committee conducted a public hearing last night that went from 6 o'clock to 10:30 last night to receive public input on the proposed rules and regulations for commercial leases by the Chamorro Land Trust. And based upon the hours of testimony by the beneficiaries of the trust, it was evident that the beneficiaries of the trust were concerned about the rules that were being proposed. most especially with opening up commercial leases to the general population. And because of the time-sensitive manner of rules and regulations lapsing into law, the deadline for this rule and reg that would lapse into law if there was no action by the body would be on September 10th. And in anticipation of that, I would like to propose that the legislature, based upon the overwhelming testimony last night, support this resolution to disapprove the rules and regs, send it back to the Chamorro Land Trust or the governor and the Chamorro Land Trust, and then of course the resolve that the body, that the Committee on Lands work with the Chamorro Land Trust to revise the rules and regulations. And so that is my motion, Madam Speaker, would then, just one final motion, or on amendment on the bill, that would be just to resolve, to strike the first resolve clause on line 20 of page 2. So remove that resolve clause.
On that motion then to delete the resolve clause on page 2 from line 20 to 22. Without any objections, so ordered.
And then, of course, Madam Speaker, once again, it is our intention to continue the dialogue that was started last night, which was obvious that there was a lot of dialogue that remains to be done in the proposal of these rules and regulations, and we're ready to do that. But we do need more time before this thing lapses into law. And so I indulge the body's understanding of the nature of this resolution and ask for their support. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
Thank you very much, Senator Pangilinan. So on the motion then to place Resolution 427 on the third reading file, unless, Senator Cabo, you would like to speak on the resolution? Okay, you're recognized.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. And Madam Speaker, I am not here to speak for or against the rules and regulations as proposed by the Chamorro Land Trust Commission. I do have some concerns about precedents being set. And again, I must note that the earlier speaker, the author of the resolution, has been in this legislative body longer than I have. But in my 10 years as a senator and dealing with the AAA process and the movement of the legislative body and the administration in the process, it has been my experience that with the administration proffering rules and regulations that were mandated by law, there is the AAA process, again, where a clock is set, and there is a 90-day window for a legislative body to act or not to act. The author has just mentioned, of course, that the end of the clock is September 10th. Again, just based on my years of experience, and this is something I was trying to work with Minority Counsel, and I have not had a chance to discuss it with Legislative Legal Counsel, as has been the normal procedures of the legislative body. There have been the movement of these rules and regulations. I've dealt with, in certain areas, the 90-day period moves through, the legislative body does not act on it, and of course, through the AAA process, those rules and regulations become, again, they are ratified. In many other instances, there has been issues in the rules and regulations, and again, being a deliberative body, and of course the deliberative body initiating policy first through the passage of a bill. Changes have been made and amendments have been made in this body in my time as a senator on the rules and regs, and amendments have been made. And with that, with the amendments being made, the body would then act on it through the voting of the body in more the conventional bill form. And I'm trying to remember my experience, and my experience is, of course, there have been 9 times out of 10, there has been with changes made there has been the affirmation by the body, voting on it, and then of course we have rules and regulations that have been amended, and of course it does go through the governor, and from there the governor will either veto or not. Of course, I don't remember the governor ever vetoing. This is just some, and again, I beg my indulgence of the body. This is something that is precedent setting, because again, it is using disproving our rules and regulations, but disproving them via legislative resolution. And again, without having a closer study at statutes and the enabling legislation of the AAA process, without, again, maybe looking, and I have not had the opportunity to go through our standing rules as set forth by this body, I'm concerned about how this is moving forward, and I'm concerned whether the actions of the resolution, being that it is, in my opinion, precedent setting, what are the ramifications? Will it be, number one, a resolution has been passed by, and whether it's passed or not, but let's say it is passed, does that in fact mean that the sentiments of the body through a ratification of a resolution adequate? Or would it have to be, in what I'm used to, being done through the normal process, which is deliberation and passage of a bill? So again, Madam Speaker, I'm just here rising to this very unique way of doing things. And again, I've not had experience in this. Of course, I will be looking. We do have a former Supreme Court justice, and we do have lawyers here. This is just something so new to me, and I'm very concerned, because if it is precedent setting, at least from my term as a senator, I want to be very careful that when we're treading in new ground, that we are indeed trying to accomplish what the goals of the author of the resolution, as well as this body, would intend, whatever way we stand on this. And again, that is my statement on this, and I'm not too sure where to go. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
Would you like anyone to respond maybe to your question? Otherwise, I can just go.
In fact, I will, again, I will again ask the author of the resolution, and again, I'm not for or against it. I just would like to maybe get some guidance here, and whether it's from the author of the resolution or from either
members.
legal, legislative, or minority counsel.
Senator
Thank you very much,
Pandini, the author,
Madam
would you like
Speaker.
to respond to his question?
I understand his concerns, and while reading the statute, I was concerned about the same thing. What I wanted to do was, the statute in plain reading for a plain man like myself, an ordinary man, it just said that the legislature shall approve, disapprove, or amend. And I thought that a resolution would express the sense of the body in terms of approving, disapproving, or amending. And I do understand his concern. It is. I'm thinking outside the box. I'm hoping he's going to follow my example when he gets somewhere else, that he'll also think outside the box. But it really is just, maybe it's a friendly rejection rather than a straight out vote no. But again, it's otherwise, we don't have, based upon all the concerns last night, where it's very clear that we're not going to be able to resolve the concerns of the beneficiaries of the trust with the rules as presented last night. And I wanted to, rather than having to come back next month with the body and after in a couple weeks, and it still won't be done. How do we disapprove it and send it back and continue the work and the progress that's been made? And I just proposed it through a resolution process, and we could, as one of my colleagues suggested, just send up the resolution and vote it down. But again, the body didn't have time to deliberate on that, and so I thought that this was just a another way of trying to accomplish expressing the sense of the body and having all the body act on the proposed rules and regs through the adoption of the resolution. So I do understand definitely the debate, and I certainly was intrigued by. I debated all of that with myself since last night. So, and I think I won in this fashion. I could have won the other way.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Vice Speaker Cruz?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise as a member of the legislature, not with any license to practice in this body. We have legal counsel and we have minority legal counsel, so I'm not giving any legal advice in this statement. I am suggesting that maybe what we should do is bring the bill forward onto the floor and vote it down. That would show unequivocally that this body addressed the bill and did not pass it. I'd like to have more discussion, but I'm just saying
I'm going to go ahead and go down the list.
That's my suggestion.
Okay. Thank you very much, Vice Speaker. On the motion, Senator Respicio, then I have Senator Blas and Senator Ada.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I rise to say that I support the thinking behind the sponsor of this resolution's trying to find a way to express to the administration the disapproval of certain rules and regulations. What I'm also rising to, Madam Speaker, is that I'm fascinated and pleased with the discussion on exactly how the rules and regs are adopted to the AAA process. As you know, my responsibility here in the legislature, and because you keep raising the bar, Madam Speaker, as chairman on rules, we're trying to think of ways where we do things and we do things with consistency. And what I was expressing to you is a very issue before us that we've been discussing in our own mind's eye together with legal counsel, and my committee has counsel as well. As you know, my committee's counsel was legal counsel to the administration for 8 years. And her biggest concern and frustration is how previous legislatures approached the AAA process, and how when previous legislatures adopt the AAA process, something through the AAA process, they put it in the code. They put it in the law. And so my concern too is that if you're going to have these rules and regs adopted and put into the code, then you kind of go against the separation of powers issues, because the adoption of rules and regs through the AAA process requires that the legislature approve, disapprove, or amend within 90 days, or it becomes law. But if you're adopting that by law, then how then in the future could these same rules and regs be adopted if the governor's not able to get the a senator to sponsor a bill, or if he's not going to sponsor the bill himself? So that would mean that the generation of these rules and regs will come to either from the governor's office or from the legislature, rather than coming from the agency, and then having that agency through the AAA process conduct public hearings. If you ask me, I think that the adoption of rules and regs period should be a purely executive function. I don't know why legislatures want to get involved in the mechanics of how these policies which we pass are being implemented. But I think that's for another philosophical debate sometime down the road. But what I'd like to philosophically debate this afternoon is, imagine if you will, Madam Speaker, if we were to put a bill to reject the rules and regs as proposed by the administration for the commercial leases for the Chamorro Land Trust Commission, we pass a bill that says that we reject it. Should we then have to wait and be subjected to the whim of the executive branch and have the governor approve or disapprove, when the statute says that the legislature has the final say? And the legislature doesn't approve within 90 days, the thing shall not become law. Now, what we're debating is the instrument to which we need to express our disapproval. Resolutions, as we know, are just point of informations. Resolutions, as we know, are just an official expression by the body. And I do subscribe to the thinking that maybe if we reject these rules and regs by a resolution, that would lead for a court challenge down the road, and maybe that would force the issue on how the legislature disapproves these things. But I'm not a lawyer also, Madam Speaker. I never pretend to be one, but what I do is surround myself with lawyers so I could be guided accordingly. And I think what the suggestion that the good senator from PD said was, let's just bring the bill before the body. It qualifies to have to be on the agenda because the good oversight chair had a public hearing last night. We probably would not require him to have a committee report that's very detailed because the hearing was just last night, and I think they'd be able to do it so quickly. But we know that bill was publicly heard. We know that we can bring that bill before the body, and we know that by rejecting the bill, that it's clear that the administration will not assume that that thing would lapse into law because the legislature rejected the bill, rather than passing a resolution and then having the administration say, well, there's also a bill before the body, and we know that resolutions can't trump bills. So I'm working with our legislative council, and at some time in the immediate future, I know she's going through her mind as well as to how the legislature can reject bills. But based on her feedback, Madam Speaker, there's nothing in the statute that says that we cannot do what we're attempting to do here. So maybe we can do both. We can pass the resolution and we can reject the bill, just to be emphatically clear that this body does not support the rules and regs as presented to us. So we could do both, Mr. Speaker. But in the meantime, we'll work out some mechanism so that way we preserve the separation of powers doctrine, and that we don't delegate our own authority by having us pass a bill to say reject these rules and regs and then be at the whim of the executive branch. And if we can't get an override on that veto, then those rules and regs will be law. Can you imagine that kind of precedent? One of our colleagues is concerned about the precedent we're setting by doing this through resolution. How about the other scenario I just proposed to you? Otherwise, we will never have a separation of power if we go the other route. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very much, Senator Respicio. Senator Blas is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, as was stated by the author of the resolution, it's a great exercise of thinking outside the box that brings out a number of the discussions, and maybe it's a high time for a number of the discussions to have, because I have to agree with the good colleague from Magana Heights that there seems to be a sense that we've been running on a sense of ambiguity with regards to what our responsibilities are. I, for one, believe that it is our responsibility as a policy-making body to ensure that the policies are, once we set out the policy, or law dictates what the policy is, it is for us to make the stamp of approval that that policy was followed. So with regards to the whole AAA process, I don't think the reason why my belief that it comes through us is just so that we can put our stamp of approval in seeing that rules and regulations were put together. It is not in this body, I believe it's not in this body's purview or power to say whether or not we approve or disapprove of that. That is purely an executive branch function. That said, Mr. Speaker, I do have concerns with regards to the matter that's before us, because first off, as we all recognize, yes, a resolution just basically expresses the intent and the sense of this body, but it doesn't have the force and effect of law. Because of that, I have two concerns with regards to this. Even if this body overwhelmingly unanimously approves this resolution, it does not say that the clock stops. It just says that we disapprove it. We didn't put it in law. We put in resolution. We just say we sense that we disapprove it. I think that there is a legal. We can set ourselves up for some legal question to be answered as to whether or not the resolution actually stops the clock, starts the clock over again. So I don't know whether or not this is going to stop the clock at September 10th. And that could well be the case here. I recognize, and yes, there were some dissenting concerns with regards to the rules and regulations that were proposed. I think the venue and the hearing where it came out, it was a productive hearing. If anything, it gives, and it should give, the commission time to go back and make some of those changes before September 10. My concern is whether or not this would have that force and effect to stop that clock. I don't have a legal background, but recognizing what the tools that I have as a legislator, as a policymaker, that this is not one of those tools that changes what is said in statute. So I'm very much concerned, and I'll continue to listen to the discussion that I'm sure that we're going to continue to have in this body with regards to this. So I want to thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very much, Senator Blas. Senator Ada, then Senator Tenorio, then Senator Muñoz.
Mr. Speaker. Gipaingin no sumaunaw gi junta ni pot diskuti por rules and regulations ni para tomorrow land trust. Magahit bulay gipaingin no manhuzong sa tima supporti i hafa gini mapropoponi gi rules and regulations ni para giniha mo na i tomorrow land trust commission. Lo i otro banda ni kumahulo no sa komentos por no makalan nai justification ni hafa na propoponi siya i rules and regulations. Imanagahit no ikinemprendeko no didi matutuho ni Tomorrow Land Trust Commission kalan no tinahong no guidance ni para tamano para magiha sa mo na no ni put tamano pa disponi itano pues universidad gi zamangilaw manhanaw huzong sa spia todo siya gi itano gi huzong atan todo siya papit sa maspia mano nakalan no titsilong mano nakalan no ti dinansi mo na matsotsugi pes ginin senada niya alpha siya na informasyon masoda ginin edzo na based on their findings they came up with a formulation for these rules and regulations and despite the fact that there was a lot of opposition to the rules and regulations, it does provide, I believe, a good starting point to be able to begin addressing a lot of the deficiencies that currently exist in how the Chamorro Land Trust assets are being managed. I'm concerned that if we were to completely take these rules and regs that have been proffered as a starting point to be able to begin correcting some of those deficiencies, is that we're going to basically maintain the status quo, and whatever is not right that's being done will continue. And so I understand the question about, is it really the responsibility of the legislature to get down into the nitty-gritty of these rules and regs to see whether, to go in there and make the necessary changes? Well, somebody's got to do it. If the administration's not going to do it, then somebody's got to pick up the ball and somebody's got to set things straight. And if the legislature is the one that's going to take the action because nobody else will, then I would be willing to certainly take the time and sit down and go line by line and find out what policies need to be put in place so that the Chamorro Land Trust properties and assets can be, in fact, properly guided. And so I'm concerned about just, outright disapproving those rules and regs. And instead, I would like that we would sit down and take the time to make the necessary changes to the rules and regs, to strengthen it, and to make it acceptable to all the stakeholders as best as we can, and then come out with a product that certainly would be a lot better than what they have now, which is really nothing. And so I have my reservations about the resolution to disapprove it, as opposed to taking the bill on and let's take it on and let's work on it and let's come out with a policy that in fact will be in the best interest of the Chamorro Land Trust and the Chamorro people. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator Ada. Senator Palacios.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Speaker, I raise is part of the intent of the resolution, but I believe that even passage of the resolution would not stop the coming into effect after the date by which, if we don't act, would become law, and probably that would be worse. So I think that if the intent is to look at this and make it better, and I think that we should, from my understanding, is that there are some portions of the rules that may be, may not be feasible. I too, either we disapprove it altogether or we amend it, but I think that the resolution is not sufficient to accomplish that. And if we pass the resolution thinking that it amounts to disapproval, I don't need to be an attorney to know that it is not the same as disapproval. So thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Senator Pangolin, do you have a way of shortcutting this whole discussion?
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I certainly appreciate the engagement of my colleagues on this issue. It certainly is much more fun than debating with myself last night on what to do with this thing. I mean, believe me, I stayed up all night. I mean, I tossed and turned in bed on what do I do with this. I mean, are all my colleagues gonna join me? Because while everybody says they're willing to work on it, at 10:30 last night, listening to the people, I was the only one there. Senator Ada was there last night, though. I want to say that, and he stayed almost to the end, but he had another engagement. But he stayed very close to the end. But we have. I was trying to find a way to continue the work, because if we do nothing, or if we're going to do something, we've got to do it by September 10th. So, I could and we could be in session longer than the budget on this bill, believe me, on what do we do with the Chamorro Land Trust, how are we going to fix all of the problems. What was interesting last night in talking to the rules and regulations was they were telling me that they made all these changes in the rules, and then they were telling me all of the problems that they found in the trust. And I said, are these rules going to solve those problems? Well, no. Then what am I doing? If these rules aren't going to solve the problems you find, then shouldn't we redo these rules to solve those problems? Well, we're going to get there. Well, shouldn't you take this back so that we can get there? Well, we'll figure it out after you've passed that. And I said, no, because once you pass this thing, it opens up the most valuable pieces of property of the trust to the general public. Is that the intent of the Chamorro Land Trust? We had the sister-in-law of Paul Bodalio last night come and stayed almost to the end to testify, to try to tell us what she knows of the intention of the trust. And she says it doesn't meet the intention. These are the beneficiaries of the trust. These are the people that have worked with the trust over all these years. These are the people that slept on the dirt at Adelup to get these things done. These are the people that camped on your court while you're hearing the court case on the Chamorro Land Trust, and they're saying, hey, what are you guys doing? You had the university come, sign an MOU, review our policies for agricultural leases, and out of that project, we get commercial lease changes. Well, help us understand why, when you have a project to look at the problems of the agricultural leases, the end product is a recommendation on commercial leases. They're not saying it's a bad thing. They're just saying, help us understand why it went from there to there. And all of that is embedded and part of the concerns of the beneficiaries of the trust. And yeah, I just finished working on the budget, and I started in May. And so I guess if I start on this thing, work all night, until September 10th, I'll have something here for you but the beneficiary says, help us understand what we're trying to do here. We'll help you work with what we think and what we see out there are the problems in the trust and how we can resolve them. And part of the reason why we went from agricultural problems to commercial leases is to support the operations of the trust with the revenues of the trust. So maybe they were thinking, if we fix and we're able to give out the most valuable lands of the trust to general leases and generate dollars, then we can go. So, it is that. And so I was trying to maybe find a more, I've kind of gotten older, these last few years, so I was kind of trying to find a friendly no. And a friendly no, I thought maybe was by resolution, and a kind of unfriendly no was voting it down and and so forth. So I tried to go with, more friendly no. As Senator Calvo said, I'm going to kill him with kindness, and so that really is it. I don't want to be belligerent about rejecting it. I wanted to find a way to do it and express the sense that the work will continue. It hasn't stopped. And I've been pushing the trust to continue the work, and I've been trying to cooperate with them. So I'll just withdraw the resolution, and we're all going to come back here September 10th. Everybody, get ready.
Well, no. Senator Munya Barnes, did you still wish to be heard? He's withdrawn it. Maybe we can take a short recess. Legislature's back in session.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I want to thank all of my colleagues, and of course, my motion to withdraw the resolution has passed. I would like to then, notwithstanding the House rules, then go back to motions.
Any objection?
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, based upon all of the discussions and the sense of my colleagues, really, I would then like, notwithstanding the House rules, that Bill number 422, an act to approve the proposed rules and regulations for the Chamorro Land Trust as submitted by the Governor in accordance with the Organic Act, be placed in the second reading.
On that motion? No.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, then I'd like to move that Bill 422 be placed in the third reading file. Yes.
You all have.
The legislature is back in session. Senator Respicio, you're recognized on the motion.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I move that we vote on both bills, substitute bill number 441-30 and bill number 422-30 without engrossment.
On that motion, then, without any objection, so ordered.
And the two confirmations. 441. 4422.
Okay. Okay, we're in the voting file. Are the members? Senator Agun, is he in? He should be. Okay. Okay, we are in the voting file, and the first bill up for vote is the budget bill for Bill 439. Can we make sure all of the members are in? I still see one more senator not here yet. Thank you very much, Senator Guthrie. Okay, we will continue. I see all of the members present. Bill 439. I'm going to ask the clerk if she could read the title of the bill.
Bill number 439-30 COR, as substituted by the Committee on Appropriations, Taxation, Banking, Insurance, Retirement, and Land, and amended in the Committee of the Whole. Introduced by Committee on Appropriations, Taxation, Banking, Insurance, Retirement, and Land, by request of Magalahing Guahan, the Governor of Guam, in accordance with the Organic Act of Guam. An act making appropriations for the operations of the executive, legislative, and judicial branches of the Government of Guam for fiscal year ending September 30, 2011, making other appropriations and establishing miscellaneous and administrative provisions.
Roll call.
Senator T.C. Ada.
Yes.
Senator V.A. Ada.
Pass.
Senator Agun. Senator Blas. Senator Calvo. Senator Cruz.
Aye.
Senator Espaldon. Senator Guthertz. Senator Munya Barnes. Senator Palacios. Senator Pangilinan. Senator Respicio. Senator Tidegree. Senator Tenorio. Speaker Wampet.
Again.
Senator V.A. Ada. Senator Blas. Senator Espaldon. Senator Titegree. Senator V.A. Ada. Senator Blas. Senator Espaldon. Senator Titegree. Senator Titegree.
Substitute Bill number 439-30 received 10 yea votes and 5 nays. Substitute Bill number 439-30 is duly passed by this body. Bill number 441-30.
Bill number 441-30 COR, as substituted by the Committee on Rules, Natural Resources, and Federal, Foreign, and Micronesian Affairs, introduced by R.J. Respicio. An act to repeal and adopt a new Title 22, Guam Administrative Rules and Regulations, Division 3, Chapter 15, and to amend 10 GCA Chapter 50, relative to the Guam Environmental Protection Agency's pesticide regulations.
Roll call. Senator T.C. Ada. Yes. Senator V.A. Ada. Yes. Senator Ogden. Okay. Senator Blas. Okay. Senator Calvo. Aye. Senator Cruz. Aye. Senator Espaldon. Senator Gutherds? Yes. Senator Munya Barnes? Yes. Senator Palacios? Yes. Senator Pangilinan? Yes. Senator Respicio? Yes. Senator Titegree? Yes. Senator Tenorio? Yes. Speaker Wampat?
Ongan. Substitute Bill number 441-30 received 15 yea votes. Substitute Bill number 441 is unanimously passed by this body. Bill number 422-30.
Bill number 422-30 COR, introduced by Committee on Rules, Natural Resources, Federal, Foreign, and Micronesian Affairs by request of Himagalayan Guahan in accordance with the Organic Act of Guam. An act to amend Chapter 75 of Title 21 Guam Code annotated relative to authorizing the Chamorro Land Trust Commission to enter into commercial leases, to provide for the rules and regulations on commercial leases, and to provide for the Poe Berdalio rules and regulations for the Chamorro Land Trust Commission to be subject to the administrative adjudication law.
Roll call. Senator T.C. Ada.
Save everybody trouble.
You sure you want me to call you first? Senator V.A. Ada. Senator Ogden. Senator Blas? Senator Calvo? Is passing by. Senator Cruz? No. Senator Espadon? Senator Gutherds? Senator Munya Barnes? Senator Palacios? No. Senator Pangilinan? Senator Respicio? Senator Tidegree? No. Senator Tenorio? Speaker Wampat? Aye. Aye. Senator Tisiada? Senator V.A. Ada? Senator Uggan? Senator Blas? Senator Calvo? Senator Espaldon? Senator Munya Barnes? Senator Tenorio? Senator V.A. Ada? Senator Blas? Senator Calvo? Senator Espadon? Senator Tenorio? Oh, did you see it done?
Bill number 422-30 received 15 nays. 15 nays. Bill number 422 failed to get the required votes to be passed, so therefore Bill 422 is rejected by this legislature. Never see that, 15 nays. Okay, we're still in the voting file. We have the appointment of Ms. Lucia Regis Perez to serve as a member of the Alcoholic Beverage Control Board. Please raise your hand for those of you who are in favor of her confirmation. Lucia Regis Perez to serve as a member of the Alcohol Beverage Control Board. 13. Okay. Ms. Lucia Regis Perez received unanimous votes. She's duly confirmed by this body to serve as a member of the Alcoholic Beverage Control Board. On the appointment of Mr. Cesar Garcia to serve as a member of the Guam Banking and Insurance Board. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Okay, Mr. Cesar Garcia received unanimous support to serve as a member of the Guam Banking and Insurance Board. He is duly confirmed. I think we've exhausted everything on the list now, so Senator Respicio, you're recognized for a motion.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, before I move to adjourn, subject to your call, I've said earlier that you continue to raise the bar for all of us here in this body and what we do, and the commitment from each of us to try to celebrate and practice our Chamorro culture. I'm very pleased to announce something. Por favor, malagazud na beitaytay estina mensaje. Mensaje para todo y mensanidad zan empleado sea. Ginin igehilo gikomenten agramento. Put election conversation Chamorro. Hafade. Magofam manai pati na zangin guaha interes para guaha election conversation Chamorro. Cada lunes dan miércoles gi a las 2 hasta a la 1 gi taloani gini gi legislatura. Para matatun gi miércoles dia 8 de septiembre hasta dia 12 de diciembre. Este na programa put para tanamas momta y fino Chamorro sa para tatsogi inina sinata para tanalalala y lenguaje tao itano. Para si Maria Pangilinan para hu tetuhun eleksyon. Tumadana dan i Legislative Employee Association i LEA gini na programa. Zangin membro how gi LEA pues 10 pesos gi mes para una pasi. Zangin ti sumasa na how gi LEA pues 12 pesos y preso gi mes. And malago how sumana gi LEA a pasi y 5 pesos después fitma y papit para ma descuenta ki pagamento mo y apas y membro. Hungan kintoro y apas y class sinya ma descuenta ki pagamento mo. Guaha sansa na an guaha man interesado sinya guaha academic credit para colegio. Por favor, zangin interesado how na tungo ham sa depende cuánto man interesado, siempre masoda y cuatro para eleksyon zan amotsan talawani. Hungan mientras man estudia hit, sinya tafan boca lokwi. Kumimbida un gatsong mo za siempre para una pasi. Para mas usa y salapi ni ma recohi para igupod Christmas sa Paraguaha programan Chamorro gigupod. Pwede ha maulik todo mona. Viva Chamorro, si Diyos masi. Si Diyos masi lokwi, Madam Speaker. And at this time I move that we adjourn subject to the call of the Speaker.
Okay, this legislature is adjourned subject to the call of the Speaker.